Hi, I'm Mike Steger. This is Your Meaning, Your Purpose. I've spent 20 years trying to figure out the meaning and purpose of life through psychological research and a lot of odd reading, I think. That's what this is a topic on today. This is part 2 of the Discovering Your Purpose idea that came to me out of Boccaccio's Decameron. This is an old book. It was written in the 1300s. I really started reading it because it's about a plague, the big bubonic plague that struck Florence and apparently killed half its population. And this was a legendary book that was written. It was a collection of 100 tales. The plot is essentially that 10 people get sick of hiding out in Florence, watching people drag dead bodies through the streets all the time. So they go to a couple of villas and they spend part of each day with stories that are supposed to divert them from the tragedy, the massacre going on. I read it because we were in a pandemic ourselves with COVID. And I discovered some really interesting things around the language that was being used. It's written in a sort of cleaned up version of Middle English, which you'd recognize from Chaucer and some of the other 1400s, 1300s sort of era writing. So there's words like me seemeth and some deal and all these sorts of things. But I was really struck by the way that the word discover was being used and the way that the word purpose was being used, right? And it was very counterintuitive, but showed me some insights into the kind of evolution of our language and these two key words that we use when we talk about discovering your purpose in life. So just to reprise very quickly, discover was really about uncovering. So it's not about going out into the world and discovering something that had never been seen before. It was actually uncovering or disclosing something within you that was of importance. So when you think about purpose in that sense, we're not going and wandering around trying to find something in the world somewhere that's going to appeal to us and that maybe no one's ever seen before. Instead, we're going to take something that's very important from inside of us. The word purpose also is used very oddly in this book, and so that's the other part of this series. So purpose is used as both a verb and a noun here. So I've got an example here. Okay, this is, I get lost in this sort of stuff. But that these are mistaken will very manifestly appear in a story that I purpose to relate. So purpose is as used in the sense like I'm going to intend to do something. I aim to do something. Here's another example. He purposed to do it. But at the same time, they talk about things amounting to very little purpose or not being compatible with a particular purpose. So we use this idea of purpose when it comes to the idea of repurposing something. So we might repurpose a barn door as a table, or we might repurpose, various fabrics around the house as face masks. But essentially there's that idea that purpose is to fashion something. So I purpose to have a particular event. I purpose to make things occur a certain way. Now we talk about purpose again as if it's this monolithic thing. And when we think about discover your purpose and the way we use it now, it's like out there is something that is really huge and really important. And I have to find it and then I have to obey it. Sorry, a lot of mosquitoes here. What it might have meant 600 years ago during another pandemic is the idea that within us there's something that we intend, that we aim, that we dream of. And so discovering our purpose in the days of the bubonic plague in mid-1300s Florence and Boccaccio's usage might have meant within inside of me is something that I will intend to do of great and deep importance. So I think we can think about it as being both of those ideas, that within ourselves is something of importance that we need to have intentions for in the world around us. So that's a little bit of Boccaccio's discovering your purpose. And if you're really kind of a book nerd, you can stick around with this because there's a kind of a weird coincidence to this. This book was, of course, written during a pandemic of its own, the world's Great Black Death. And that's why I started reading it. But I got curious about the binding. I was like, this is old. It's got to be worth money. Maybe I can sell it or something. I don't really know, right? But apparently, it's by something called the Bibliophysist Society, which produced books over a course of like 60 different years and was never really a real publisher. It was always this sort of like way of getting seedy books into the marketplace. So you could never tell who actually published the book. What I learned about this particular book, I think, is that it was probably created in the cheapest fashion possible out of source material that was no longer copyrighted, and it was sold during the Great Depression. So this was a book that never had a price tag because it was always being marked down, even during the Great Depression. And so I think that the coincidence is very odd, because right now, of course, in the world, we've seen the world's largest slowdown in production, in productivity, in trade in the world's history, the recorded economies, and we're also seeing the highest levels of unemployment in the United States since the Great Depression. So it's kind of a morbid coincidence, but this book I started reading because it was about trying to keep yourself occupied during a plague, also is about a story of trying to sell great works of art for very, very cheap in the Great Depression. Anyway, so coincidences are all around us, and hopefully it was at least a lighthearted look at how we might discover our purpose in a very different way. Thanks for joining me.